Welcome back. As usual, if you can turn on your cameras, I have 50 people and only 2 cameras. So please don't forget your assignment. Assignment 4, your first programming assignment is due today. You have a couple of hours to finish, hopefully to review any last minute issue. And today I want to share with you common errors. Things that usually the graders mark as an error in your submission when they are related with class diagrams and source code. I am not going to share with you right now errors regarding the use case diagrams. I think you're familiar with that. We did assignments about that before. So I think this one could be the easy part. The other two, the first time that I'm asking you to submit class diagrams, source code in a project, and obviously we're going to review that they match. So common errors, hopefully you can check my slides, the lecture, and then you have a couple of hours to review that your diagram and your source code are better than the example that I'm going to show you. So let's check. Okay, guys, so errors in the diagrams and errors in the source code, things that you need to know. Let's review. First, with the class diagrams. I am going to show you the errors. There are for my students in another class. So it's something that students do. I am going to start with this. And example number 1. What is wrong with this class diagram? In particular, please, the boxes in red and the magenta ones. Did you saw anything wrong?
You have like white arrows on one end and then they're black diamonds on the other. So that is a very confusing relationship to have there.
Well, to be clear, that relationship do not exist.
Right.
You cannot have like inheritance here and the diamond here. So guys, when you choose which relationship you're going to use, please, one and only one, do not mix things. If you have this error, this is kind of wrong. Very, very wrong. Clear. Hopefully, yes. It's like obvious, right? Another one. What do you think about this relationship here connected with this class in relationship with this source code? And when in the chat, you can put the private variables in the diagram. That is okay. There is going to be another problem, but I am going to talk about that maybe in another example. Okay, that is a good one. What kind of relationship is this one with, hopefully you are able to notice, it's a triangle and there are this line with dots. What that part of the diagram is telling you? Realization, good. In the source code, realization should be what there? What are we expecting in the source code? Implements, good. So hopefully everyone is following the answer in the chat. I am just like correct answer. So hopefully everyone else is following the ideas. If you have in the diagram this connection that I do not understand why do we need to do realization from an interface that is called border, whatever. But if you put that, something is missing there. Moreover, now that we're reviewing the source code, what do you think about this source code here for the class graphical user interface and these relationships here? Because we agreed that inheritance with the diamonds are wrong. What could be the correct relationship here between, for instance, the frame and the graphical user interface? And here is like the frame is this one. It's a variable and you have the new. The correct relationship should be Composition, correct. And composition is the black diamond. So basically the error here is the arrowhead should not be there. Good. Okay, so this one similar is a triangle with dots, implement, action listener, but this not here. Second error. As I mentioned before, we're going to review that your source code and the class diagrams that you submit, they match. They match in things like global variables, implement and extend. So my advice, you are working very, very hard to do the programming. Do not forget to review that your source code and your class diagram match before you submit, because an important amount of points is in the class diagram, not only in the programming assignment, not only in making the game to work. So check your class diagram. Okay, moving forward, another example. Here, do you notice any error or problem with the diagram? And the red boxes maybe help you, but this column and this column is not UML. Good. Hopefully you remember we mentioned plus and minus, private and public. That is the thing that we're using. I am expecting you to submit a class diagram in which your public is plus and your private is minus. I have no idea what happened here with these students, but that is not UML. Check your UML, check the previous videos if you need, but this is wrong. If you're using a tool, yes, that is a very important thing. That is the way that you represent the line, public, private, whatever. And if this is a variable, it's going to be under that format. The first element is the name, and then at the end, the type. That is not exactly the same that in the program. Probably that is something that we are not going to penalize so strong. I mean, again, my recommendation is for you to use a software that helps you to do the UML diagram. Some of you are going to be using PowerPoint maybe. And well, this is the correct thing to do. Hopefully you do that thing. But I am more concerned about things like this or this than about the order of the type and the name. But yes, this should be the correct thing to do. And hopefully your diagrams have that one. You can use Asta. There are a lot of tools there. I am fine with whatever you are familiar with. If somehow you are working with software and you are going to continue working with software, my expectation is that you are familiar, at least you know one tool that you can use. If you are going to use PowerPoint, well, at least review the notation, at least try to make something that looks like a UML diagram. Another thing that I would recommend you, be careful with the reverse engineering. Be careful with the tools that read your software, your source code, and create the diagram. It's just like the same that the tools that translate from one language to another, they make mistakes. So it could be a good starting point, but when you have the diagram, just be sure to review your diagram and check that the diagram is correct. The tools make mistakes. Be careful. And if you send me the appeal and the appeal is, Professor, the diagram was created by this tool, and if it's wrong, it's because of the tool, before submit, you review it. It's your fault, not the tool. You are the one taking the class, not the tool. So review before submit. The tools make mistakes. Anyway, so another one. What do you think about this? Like a submission, and hopefully you submit something different, but what do you think about this? Okay, I agree with you. They make an attempt. It's like what? 1/10, something. Guys, is one diagram. Do not send me classes here and relationships here. Hopefully we are clear that the class diagram is the elements and the relationships, one diagram. Something like this is not exactly a class diagram. No idea why you need to put something like class name at the top. It's not part of the notation. We reviewed that in the previous week. There are videos about that. If you have questions about what should be inside of the boxes, just review the videos or your favorite book or maybe an online tutorial, whatever, but be careful with do not submit something like this. It's going to be something like 1/10 just for trying, and your grade is not going to be good, even though your software worked well. Remember, it's not a programming assignment. It's more than that. So hopefully agree with me. This is not exactly what we are expecting you to submit. What do you think about this one? Chromebooks. Guys, again, if you use PowerPoint or whatever tool, the box with lines right and left, is not a class. It's not UML diagram, sorry. What do you think about this thing inside? And I know that you do not know what is this project. It's not your project, but something is kind of a concern when you read this column there. Hopefully you are able to read, but this all the plus. Okay, everything is public, and in particular, everything, and this is the part in which you put the variables. If you submit a class diagram and your class diagram have all the variables public, according with what we reviewed before, abstraction, encapsulation, remember, that is not a good solution. Your variables, most of them private. Sometimes you're going to have one public, or some of them are going to be public, mainly if they are constants. That is possible. But having all of them public is a big red light. If something could be wrong here, something is wrong there. Yeah. Something wrong with the main? Tricky question, but you read that diagram, you read the main. Do you remember something that we're expecting with the main in the class diagram? Okay. Underline, correct. Remember, the main is static, and the way that you represent static in the class diagram is the things that are static go with that line. So in that moment, you notice that this was done in a tool that is not from UML, or you forget to add the attribute static when you create this method there. Be careful with that. Use details, but the class diagram and the code should match. Later, we want to create code automatically from the diagram, so check that. What do you think about this thing here? Do we need that text? Okay, it's not UML. To be clear, the only thing that you need in UML for association that is association, period. You don't need to put labels. Moreover, and this is my request for you if you are using PowerPoint or something like that to do your diagrams. What is this arrowhead here? Those two do not exist in UML. They are not UML. So Be careful. Again, I know that maybe this comes from using PowerPoint or Keynote or some software for doing diagrams, not UML diagrams. Be careful with that. This arrow or this arrow, these ones, they are not UML. So somehow maybe you can fix it. I mean, this one is correct. I am assuming that here they could do something similar, but something happened there. Yeah, I am kind of suggesting do not use PowerPoint for UML diagrams. Makes sense, right? I mean, you are engineers and you do not use PowerPoint for UML diagrams. It's like an architect or a civil engineer doing blueprints for the building in PowerPoint. I don't know if that is possible, but not a good idea. Anyway, be careful with this. Another one, similar to the previous one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one, they do not exist. They are not UML. Tricky one. What do you think about this thing inside the box? You do not know what is this project. It's not your project yet, but there is something there that catch your attention. It's like the name of the class is graphical user interface, and inside I have this variable. If you remember, you mentioned before, the name of the variable and then the data type, and the variable have the same data type as the class. Moreover, is with the underline, so that one is static, a circular reference, yes. And circular references are a red light. We're going to talk more about them because there is one particular case in which we need them. We're going to talk about the singleton pattern, and we're going to have this reference in a circle. But in general, unless we're using the pattern or some particular specific cases, this is a red light. Moreover, you are doing a graphical user interface. In graphical user interfaces, you do not need circular references. There is no reason in a graphical user interface for having a variable which is from the same type as the class. My idea here, my comment for you, please, before submit, review your source code. And maybe sometimes happen that you're going to have source code there that is from a previous version, for something that you try to do, for something that you change. Delete the source code and therefore the elements in the diagram that do not correspond to the final version, to the version that you're submitting. Just review. Maybe you have code like this that is not longer in use, or that maybe you never use, but for some reason just appears there, maybe, I don't know, some copy paste from something. Review your code because we're going to review what you submit. So delete everything that you do not want to be graded. Review everything that could make an error. If you remember, do not repeat yourselves and keep it simple. And this in the diagram is keep it simple minus minus, is decreasing your points for keeping simple things. Be careful. Another one. What do you think about this column here and this source code here? Something is wrong? Something that the TA is going to do. Your diagram, your source code, comparison. Here I have the source code, I have the diagram, I am comparing, I am asking you to help me to compare. This is good or not? Hopefully you get the idea, like I am using red boxes, and usually when I put something in a red box, it's because I am suggesting an error. So it's an error there, and you just catch the error. It's like, these arrows probably are not correct. Did you notice these variables here? They are global variables, right? They are attributes. They are attributes inside of this class. what is the relationship between a class, my graphical user interface, and the classes, like all these classes that you are using to create global variables, attributes. The relationship should be which one? The one that I have here is association, right? Association is correct. I have global variables. Which should be the relationship with global variables? Global variables, remember the diamond? White diamond or black diamond? Aggregation or composition, one of those two. There is no other option. You are showing me source code with global variables, then mandatory, the relationship involved a diamond. The only decision is black or white. This is wrong. That is not the relationship, not the one that corresponds to this code. We are doing more than just calling methods. We are creating variables. Now, in particular, the relationship here, the diamond should be white, aggregation, or black, composition. In the chat, you told me composition. Why? How do we know that it's composition, or what do we need to check here in order to know if it's one or the other? And hopefully you agree with me, the news. Thank you. We have news. If we have news, we're creating the object. There is any way in which I can have an object, graphical user interface, without having the others? And you know programming. You know that if I put the news there, those objects are going to be created together every single time that I create an object, graphical user interface. That one, graphical user interface, cannot exist with those two objects, because it's not possible to create an object, graphical user interface, without those news to run. That is an example of composition. The car and the engine, both are going to be together always, because I have global variables and I have the news outside or in the constructor. Those two cases, black diamond. Very common error, guys. Maybe the first thing that I could ask you to review before you submit: aggregation, composition, association. Open your classes and be sure that whatever you put in the draw, in the diagram, is what you have in the source code. Because I am going to ask the TAs to do this, exactly this. Diagram, code, they match or not? If they do not match, this is not fine. This is not the class diagram for that source code. Good? What do you think about that diamond there? I am going to do this. Imagine that this one is the class book in this particular project, and this one is the class library. So I just change the names to give you an idea of what is happening here. The class book, the class library. Any problem with that diamond? Exactly. Number one, with this example, the diamond is in the wrong position. Remember, the diamond should be together with the class that is the owner, the important one. So in this case, the diamond should be with the library. Just like in the example before, the diamond should be here with the class graphical user interface, because it's the one that has the variables. Be careful where you put the diamonds. Now, answer in the chat. Yes, if you put the news here, or if you put the news in here in the constructor, the result is the same. If it's the default constructor, if you know that that constructor is always going to run, in this case, it's the default one, so for sure is going to be called. If you have the news outside or in the constructor, same result, that is composition, because always, those news are going to be executed. So if you check the code and those news always run, there is no way that those news are not going to be executed, composition. Other ways is going to be used aggregation. For instance, when you have a method add that is going to do the new, but there is nothing for sure that add is going to be called, aggregation. What you have in the linked list or most of the data structures is this aggregation, a method that do the add inside to the new, but there is no for sure that you're going to call add. In fact, at the beginning, you always have a data structure that is empty. Use like the example with the car and the wheels. The car exists, and later you add the wheels. The opposite that happened with the engine. Good. So review your diamonds. Other things. Similar. All these do not exist. You are aware of that. What do you think about the source code here? And I just give you the diagram as a reference. Something wrong with the diagram and the source code? And this is for your project that you submit today, but also kind of the questions that I am going to use for your quiz, the next one, and also for your exam. Diagram and code, and the question is correct or not correct, which is the error, and I am expecting you to help me with that. Number one, yes, agree with the chat. According with the diagram, there is this triangle here with these dots there, and that is realization, and that corresponding the source code with an implement. However, nothing there. Wrong. Something about the variables? At this point, you know, there are variables. If there are variables, where are my diamonds? You have variables, you should have diamonds. Black or white, different story. But you have variables, global, you need diamonds in the diagram. Just like that. That is an easy thing to review. Diamonds, global variables. No diamonds, no global variables. That is the case. Check. Another thing, a tricky one. Did you notice the static order? Is the static in the class diagram? What should be in the class diagram with the static? You already mentioned this before. Static here? I am expecting underlines. Yeah. Hopefully by now, and with these examples, you have an idea of how the TAs are going to review your submission. And hopefully you have the opportunity to do this with your own work before submit, so you do not make these kind of mistakes, right? Other people did. Good. Now, those are the class diagrams. Any question? Review inheritance, review implementation. The diamonds should be there if you have global variables, and be very careful about association. And you remember, option 1, option 2, option 3, 4, 5. No other thing. Your classes, and they are connected somehow with those lines. Any other thing, suspicious. So good with the class diagram? You can do this, right? Okay, source code. Let's talk about the source code. I start with the source code in the previous lecture. I show you some examples. In particular, with the source code, I am talking about dry and keys. I want to show you more examples about that I need to be sure that you're going to follow at least those two principles in your source code, plus guidelines. And guidelines in particular, not the only ones, but I am going to ask the TAs to be careful reviewing names, obviously, that you use the correct names for the things, and Javadoc. Again, not the only things, but if you have a few hours to review things, if you can only review a few things in your code, at least be sure that those two things are correct. At least those two things. There are more. My recommendation was review the guidelines for Java. They are online. Hopefully you know it already. But, well, if you're going to do this today and you have some hours only, at least review those two things. Anyway, the names, the Javadoc, the drive, and the keys. Examples, and you can help me with the grades. Number one, what do you think about this code? It's like one class. The class looks like is the graphical user interface. The class have this method main here, and what? You can read the code. Good, but what can we improve in this source code? Nothing? Perfect. Okay, let's start with, I am going to go top down. So probably not in order of importance, but just top down. Javadoc, do we need something there above line 29 for the Javadoc? Can you agree with me that according with Javadoc, any class need a Javadoc comment used before the class? So number one, I am missing something there. Number two, and moving with the Javadoc, do you think that the Javadoc here for the main is correct? I am missing something, or it is perfect? There is a comment, looks like Javadoc, but yeah, don't worry, they are going to update the rubric.
Oh, the parameters and variables aren't there.
One of the important things when you put Javadocs in your methods, you mention the parameters. Either you explain the parameters if you're going to use them, or at least you mention, I am not going to use this. I don't care about this, but there are parameters. And the return value. Okay. So you are helping me with those two labels. They are missing and they are important. So you know it. Now, that is kind of the comments. The Javadoc, yeah, it's relevant. It's not the most important thing that I want to show you here. The most important thing here, and someone mentioned already there, is like this source code here, and this source code here, and this source code here, and this here, and all this block here. Do we need all that for a graphical user interface?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we just need the client UI method and then to set it visible to true. But if that stuff is needed, then to abstract it to its own method, and then potentially abstract that anonymous class into its own class apart from the invoke later method.
Yeah. In fact, I am going to take the first part of the answer. Guys, I am sure that you are using an environment to develop your software. Whatever is your environment, The environments provide you with maybe the first class, and maybe the method main, and maybe even some lines for the method main. Just like this. These are lines that someone submit because the environment that they were using put those lines there. Every single time that we create a program, it's our responsibility to understand what is the goal of the lines that we're including in the program. These particular lines. These lines are creating multi-threading. These lines are there because the environment that this programmer used put there the code for a system, a software that work with multi-threading. And one of the threads is going to be the graphical user interface, and there are going to be other threads. Do we need that for your assignment? No. In your assignment, you do not need multi-threading. The only multi-threading part that you are doing is timer. That's it. I mean, we haven't talked about thread or runnable things. So if by any chance you are using a developer environment, and by any chance your developer environment is suggesting you to add all this stuff for your project, all this is garbage because you are not using them. You do not need that. How do we know if we need it or not? Do you understand this? If the answer is yes, I understand this, probably you need it. You know what is the goal of this. If you have something in your program that you do not add, that you do not understand, that you do not know why it's there, probably it's there to solve a problem that is not your problem. It's something extra. So do not be afraid. And even though your environment gives you something crazy like this, use delete things. Do not keep source code that is not solving a particular problem or a particular functionality in whatever you are doing. So I agree with all the previous description. This is not something that should be there. And later, when we move to the multi-threading part, this is going to be in a different place, not exactly the best place to put all this code. For this program, in this main, those are the only lines that we need. The main, the closing bracket, and 2 lines inside. Done. Everything else, garbage. Be careful with that. Do not submit things that you do not understand. Do not trust in your environments, depending which one you are using, but be careful. Good, so done. Another example, which one you like the most? And I have option A, and I have option B, doing something similar. Yeah, I already put the red box, so I am giving you an idea, but why the first one have the red box? Comment in the chat. I'm not sure if I am going to have the time to review the lambda expression with you. For the people familiar with this, be careful with the lambda expression. They are powerful. You can achieve great things with that, but also you can create spaghetti code, something very crazy to understand for others. Careful with the lambdas. Can you agree with me that a solution like this one is better than a solution like this one? Can you visualize that B option is like, okay, I am going to have several names. I can put those names in an array, and then I can just return the one that corresponds to the index in the array. I can make that connection between a number and a string because the strings are in an array and the number is the index in the array. instead of doing all this switch case with the number and according with the number, return a string. Let me be clear. If you have a problem and you can solve the problem using data structures, using some kind of abstraction for the solution, instead of writing if and loops, that solution probably is going to be better. The most basic thing that you learned in your programming class was if and loops, conditions and loops. Yeah, they are everywhere, but be careful to do not limit your tools to only conditions and loops. Think in a different solutions. Moreover, small solutions. Obviously, I am not going to review in your submission this level of detail, but I want to share with you that sometimes loops and conditions alone are not the best way to go. Okay, hopefully now you change and use the second one. Anyway, there are several examples like this one. Okay, guys, so next one, another example. Inside of the boxes, did you notice anything that can be fixed inside of those boxes?
Maybe not have nested try catch blocks.
Yes, that is correct. Did you notice that I have a try catch that is enclosing everything? And then I create a while loop, which is okay. I have a while loop. So the while is inside of the try catch. And then I have another try catch here. What do you think? There is any chance that we can reduce this code to only one try catch? Okay.
Can you put two try catch or two catch statements instead of using and then instead of catching just exception, catch the interrupted exception instead, because it's more specific to the goal you're trying to accomplish?
Yes. Something that sometimes we forget is that the try catch work, as you mentioned, one try, and I can have a cache, close that one, and another cache, close that one, and another cache, and I can basically catch different exceptions. So if I need to cache this one and then others, I can have that in use one block. Having a try catch inside of another try catch is kind of suspicious. Again, I do not want to tell you that is something that you should not do never. There are always exceptions. We're going to review exceptions for several different things with the class diagrams, but the point is a red light. 90% of the time, point to an error, unless you can justify and explain why do you need really a nested try catch. It's something that my recommendation is, when you have something like this, ask yourselves, really? There is a reason that I can provide to justify a try catch inside of another one? And if you cannot, probably is asking you to refactor. Moving forward, and I fully agree with that, just notice. There is any reason for that if else to be inside of the try catch? the only line here that need a try catch is the threaded loop. And just because that line needs a try catch, we need to talk about threads, but that particular instruction need to catch an exception. But just because of that, you are adding try catch to a condition that is basically updating values of variables in a crazy way. That is a different topic. Fully agree with the chat. That should not be there. For someone reading this, that someone is going to ask, why handling those variables is something that I need to be careful with exceptions. And in general, yes, that is a good conclusion for this example. It's kind of a mess. Don't do this with your code. Another comment, a small one. What do you think about this big white space? Be careful with the tabs. This here looks like a method. This here looks like a method. What could be the justification for methods to have all this space from the start of the line? Yeah, something like that. So can we agree that if this is a method, it should be here in this point? I mean, one tab or something very close there. Moreover, remember, the idea is that you are able to print this and review this printed. There is a reason because you have this red line in your developer environments. I am sure that whatever developer environment you have, there is a line, not sure if in red or something bold, but there is a line there that is telling you, hey, stop here. Because when you print the code, the things out of this point probably are not going to be able to be printed in the same page. All these things should not be there. And the reason because you have all this here is because all this white space there. Readability. Yes, your goal is to make your code to work, but also to be sure that someone else in your team or in a different one can read your code. And this is not exactly an example of something easy to read. So be careful. No, it is not. But another one, Javadoc. What do you think about this Javadoc? Two things. Javadoc asks you for comments above the imports. Do we put comments above the import statement? Yes or no? Javadoc above the imports? Never. Javadoc above the class or the method directly, not for the imports. This is the place for the Javadoc. You want to add author version or so on? Where do we need to put this information? Hopefully you agree with me. Line 23, your Javadoc, first the comment, and then the labels with all this. Comment, extra information, the labels. For the class, the author, the version, whatever. For the methods, as you mentioned, the parameters, the return type, if the method is not void. Comment, and they add something, the labels that you need to use. This is wrong. This should be down. What do you think about these two variables there? Probably I'm going to put that in a box in another slide, but right now, 2627, what do you think about 2627? What will you do to improve 2627?
If they're static, should they be public?
Well, it is not mandatory to be public with the static. We can have a static method getter. It's a possibility. However, did you notice that they are static and also they have a value? Yes.
Right. Ah, final. Okay.
The static with the public is something that is a suggestion, not mandatory. So that is a red light for that. But the big red light is usually if you have something static and if you're providing a value, it's because that something is going to be a constant. And if that something is going to be a constant, then number one, the final. Static, final, whatever, and the value. And what else should happen with these names in green if they are final and static? The name for a constant should be uppercase, correct? So this here and this here, two things for the line 2627. If by any chance you have constants in your programs, static, final, and be sure that they are uppercase. Because again, when someone reads your code or someone reads the class diagram, they are going to notice they are constants here or something. So be careful with that. All this is wrong, outside of the line. Hopefully by now you read this name label or label one. There are better names for that. I already mentioned that in the previous lecture, so I'm not going to stop on that, but those errors are there, even though I am not adding the boxes, just because we already review it. That one. What do you think about this space here? In particular, what do you think about this comment? What do you think about this comment? Do I really need in line 31 the comment constructor?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Not at all. And then I would say like move the document comment above the constructor too.
Those two things. Thank you. Number one, guys. If I am noticing that this is the name of the class, whatever is the reason for the name, this is the name for the class. There is no data type here. If I have a method that do not have a data type and the name is the same as the class, please do not repeat yourselves. And as you mentioned, the comments, Javadoc comments, you do not put Javadoc comments inside of the body of the methods. Above of the class, above of the method, that's it. Yeah, okay, as you mentioned in the chat. Good. That is true. Guys, remember, you need to review the guidelines of the language that you're using. And I am aware, the guidelines for Java are different than the guidelines for other languages. You review C, C++, and in C, C++, something like having two words, you do something like that. In C, in particular, the underscore, and you connect the two words. But in Java, that is wrong. In Java, the guidelines told you put them together and use the uppercase in the second word. Two different ways, two different languages. Remember, you are writing in order for your program to be read by other people using the same language. So you need to follow the guidelines for the particular language. If I follow the Java guidelines to create something in Python or in C, C++, probably the people, you are going to notice that, well, this particular programmer could be very good in Java, but it's not exactly good in the language that we're using right now for this project. So follow the guidelines for the particular language. It is important. Now, this one, something in the top. Something in the top, what do you think?
Maybe the type is missing for the parameter.
Well, yes. In general, I am missing an explanation for the parameters. For the main, if you are not going to use the parameter in the main, probably the explanation could just be empty, or you could put a note none in use, whatever. In this particular method, I have this parameter flag. I am using the parameter there. There is no explanation about what values can have this parameter and what is going to be the result of using that parameter with maybe 0, 1, 2, 3. It's a parameter that is controlling the method. How? If you have a parameter and you are using the parameter, it is expected that you put a description of what are the consequences of that parameter, what are the values that you can use for the parameters. Remember, the people that read the Javadoc is not reading usually the source code. Just like what you do when you read the Java API. You read the HTML that was created with the Javadoc, you read all the description of the methods and the variables, but you are not reading, or you do not access the source code. So it's one or the other. Someone asked me in an email, is not kind of redundant having the Javadoc and having the program? And the answer is no. It's redundant when you have comments, general comments, global comments, and the source code. But the goal of the Javadoc, remember, is to create the documentation of the API, is to create these web pages that are going to be useful for people that are going to have somehow access to your classes. And that people is not going to read the source code. So there is no redundancy. I read this one, or if I have access to the source code, well, I am going to follow the source code. Maybe I use compact the comments. Good. The space, we already mentioned this before. Careful with your spaces. What do you think about this particular line? There is something that we can do to improve that particular line, the 70. Think about, I did this program, and then I am going to give this program to you, and I am going to ask you to modify the program. What would you prefer to have in that line that could help you to better understand what is happening? You know what happened? Number one, I know that this method is in order to establish the color of the background. Just reading the name of the method, set background, give me that idea. Even if I do not know Java, I like set background. Whatever, it's a method that I am inheriting, or it's a method that is in this class, set background. This is going to change the color of the background. And then I continue reading, and it like makes sense. The method set background receive as a parameter a color, an object color. Again, even if I do not know Java Swing, this just look like obvious. It's a set background, and then the parameter should be a color, and probably that color is going to be the one that I am going to use as a background. So kind of moving forward good. When I read these numbers, and I agree with the chat, what happened? We are human beings. And I am sure that if you're reading this, your brain starts thinking like, which are those colors? What is the color 171 to 16? Your brain is asking, what is that color? You are getting distracted of the main thing, the program, and your brain is thinking about which one is that color. If you can, avoid that problem to your reader. Because again, it's not a problem for you. There is nothing wrong with the code. But just thinking about the reader is, oh, I do not want my reader to get distracted trying to figure out quickly which color is the combination of those magic numbers. Solution. What could you do? Usually people tell me two solutions. Solution number one, the first thing that the people usually recommend is, what if you put a comment there? What if you put a comment here at the end of the line and you tell the people this color is whatever? Adding a comment. What do you think of the solution?
That doesn't make the code very self-documenting. If you just add a comment to kind of resolve that, you should instead use variables to designate which type of color that is, because that would be easier to maintain and easier to read.
Yeah. Adding the comment, even though solve the problem, because your brain is going to be happy, like, okay, this is that color, so you're not going to get distracted. I fully agree with the comment. Adding a comment in the source code is not exactly the best thing to do, because we talked about this before, right? The best source code is the source code that do not need comments. So if we have here a case in which I need comments to make my reader happy, probably there are something that I can do in the source code to avoid the comment. My other solution, can we just create a variable color and give that variable a name, and then make that variable equal to new color and put the magic numbers. And then obviously use that one here. You think that doing this will solve the problem? I am not sure if the numbers correspond to the gold. I just select something. Could be the maroon, whatever. If I create a variable and I put the variable a name, and that name corresponds to the name of the particular color, when I do color gold equal new and the numbers, my brain is happy because, okay, you are going to use the color gold. And my brain is going to ignore the numbers because, okay, those are the numbers, RGB for the gold, whatever, I don't care. I have the idea that I am using the color gold or whatever is the color. And then below, when I do set background, parentheses, and just put the name of the color, it's like, okay, you want your background to be yellow or maroon or whatever. You do not need a comment anymore. Your code is self-documented. Moreover, if you think about changing the color, maybe that color is going to move to a library or to a global variable or to a constant. Someone mentioned the constant. Different idea that you can evolve the program. You can growing with this. So best solution here, I need a variable, the variable for the values, and then use the variable instead of having all this compact in one line. Makes sense? Good. What do you think? Almost finishing line 86. We already reviewed an example before, but I am going to use maybe this one for your quiz or your exam. 86. What do you think is the problem with 86? Dry or keys?
Dry, definitely.
Remember that we talk about this, do not repeat yourselves. And I told you, like, really, who is going to repeat things in a program? Believe me, it happened. And the examples that I show you are students like you from a different class. But my goal, guys, go and review the software that we're going to submit today. And just be sure to search for at least these kind of errors. It's very easy to notice the error in another code, in the source code of another person, like the one that I am showing you here. But believe me, it's going to happen in some of your submissions. I am going to be showing you examples like this sometimes in the future that correspond to you. So hopefully not. Please do not give me material for more slides. Review your submission before submitting tonight. Good. So one more thing. What do you think about this one? It's a program. I am showing you all the lines until the 90, and then the program continue here with the 91 and down. Recommendation for this part. Believe me, I do not want more material for the slides. Do your best for your assignment. What do you think about this?
If that's an example, I think the example should be at the top in the Javadoc rather than being at the bottom of the class.
Good point. You know what? This team was working and doing things, and they just comment this part because it's something that they do not use anymore. So sometimes you are working, and sometimes you are going to have methods, or maybe like this one, a version of the main that you are not going to use anymore because now the main is in a different part. Yeah, I agree. When you are working, you are going to put comments on things. When you submit your project, when you finish with your sprint, when you finish with the thing that you're going to deliver, please delete all this code that is not useful. Do not leave the comment there. If you need to have a control of different versions, please use GitHub so you can have a version with this code there. But when you submit, be sure that your submission is clean. No comments, no source code commented. If the source code is commented, the source code is not being used, and that is not clean. So anything that is not needed, please delete. Yeah. The closest that you can be in your assignment to clean code, the better. The only thing that we're going to grade is dry, keys, and the guidelines. That is the only thing that we talked in the previous lecture. Those are the things that I am going to ask the TAs to enforce. This one is kind of an extra thing. Probably you're not going to lose points for this. However, it's a good practice. Start applying good practices in your assignments. You're not going to lose points about this in this assignment, but in the future, maybe you are. So I just want to be sure that you know that when you submit something, please, all the code that you are not using is not for comments. You should delete it. If you need control of the versions, GitHub or something else, but it's not something that you submit. Good? Any question, guys? I mentioned errors in the diagrams. I mentioned errors in the source code. Hopefully, I give you a big picture of the things that we're going to be grading. Therefore, you have time to fix things if needed, or now you can be confident that what you have is good to go. Questions? Silence. That is good. Okay, guys. Now you do not need the score table for the assignment. Remember, use the enemy moving, the player able to move, the 3 elements that are static, and the multi-threading. I can move, and the other guys can move. You can increment the score randomly. every time that you move, yes, that is fine. You need the score, but I didn't give you a particular rule about how to increase the score. You can just increase when I move or with the time. That is fine. Good? Okay, guys, I am going to stop here. Good luck with your assignment. See you next week. Thank you.